Thank you for joining us for the first podcast of the year for Staffing in Sync. We're having a live panel discussion featuring some leading experts in the staffing industry. My name is Tom Erb. I'm excited to be the host for this year. This is the second year of Staffing in Sync, but it's my first time being the host, so I'm excited. We've got a great panel. I can't wait. We were already talking for 10 minutes, and we said, geez, we got to save some of this stuff. So I'd like to introduce our panelists just at a high level, and then I'll have each of them talk about themselves a little bit more. We have Therese Baker, who is president and owner of Abtech, as well as the current board chair for ASA. We have Lisa Francis, who is president of LJF Consulting. She's also former CEO and president of Supplemental Healthcare and Staffmark, and also a former board chair for ASA. And we have Ron Hetrick, who is the vice president of staffing strategy and senior labor economist of Lightcast. He is also the author of The Demographic Drought. So thank you all for joining. I'm excited to talk about the industry. Our topic for today is going to be about what's going on with the industry, what's going to be going on with the industry. And I think we all have some unique perspectives to be able to talk about this. So I'm going to start off and just have you guys give a little bit more background about yourself. Lisa, if you want to go ahead and start off.
Sure, I'd be glad to. So thanks everybody for participating in this. And I hate to even say how many years I've been in the business. So when I start counting it up, for a lot of years, I just say over 30, over 35, but it's getting close to 40 now. So it's hard to believe to be in an industry that long. And so I did, big chunks of time with different companies. I started with Audia, who later became Adecco after they bought Echo. Then I was with Spherion, who later became a part of Randstad. And then, as Tom mentioned, I was the CEO of Staffmark and Supplemental Healthcare. And whether brilliant or not, I happened to decide that I was going to semi-retire in March of 2020. So like 2 weeks after we announced that I was going to not run companies full time, but kind of move on to what I'm loving, what I'm doing right now is the pandemic hit. So, I know all of you guys have had, an interesting couple of years running companies since then. But I now, one of the things I always wanted to do when I retired from running companies full time was to participate on boards of directors and be advisors. And some of my mentors as I was growing up had moved into that phase. And so I'm having a great time right now. I'm on 5 different boards, all of them somewhat related to staffing. And then I'm advising a couple of CEOs that are running, multi-billion-dollar firms, and just hopefully being a help to them as they kind of try to solve problems. So I never would have thought that this can kind of be the best time in life. I didn't know that, but now I do. So look ahead and look forward.
Thanks, Lisa. Therese?
Hi, I'm Therese Baker. I am president of Abtech Professional Resources, and I have been in the industry 30 plus years. I always tell people I started when I was 5, and I've enjoyed it. I've done executive search, retained search. I've been a corporate recruiter. I have pretty much done every aspect, HR, but I really love the staffing aspect of it. I mean, there's no better job than to give somebody a job. And I am also the chair of the American Staffing Association. So I'm pretty proud of that. And Abtech, we are an IT staffing firm located in the DC area. We do national staffing. We are family owned and operated. I think there are 7 of us that support the business. So that's a bit of a challenge on its own, but love the industry. Happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, Therese. Ron?
Ron Hetrick. Background. So I actually came into the staffing industry, instead of saying how many years, I'll tell you when. I came in on April Fool's Day of the year 2000. I had spent 8 years prior to that at the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Eventually, I was the supervisor of the payroll employment survey. So every month they come out with the unemployment rate and how many jobs we added, and I was supervising that jobs we added side, which we'll be talking about a little bit of that today. I did about 20 years. I was in Allegis and got to do a number of different functions, including kind of spinning up a lot of the market analytics side. At one point overseeing data science, just spent a lot of time, really passionate, kind of breaking down markets, trying to figure out the economics behind staffing. And then I came to MZ, then MZ Burning Glass, and now Lightcast back in 2020 during the fun times that we all kind of went through. And I've been here ever since. And I'm just really glad to be here.
All right, thanks, Ron. So a little bit of my background. I'm Tom Erb. I am president and founder of Talent Resources. We are a consulting and training company for the staffing and recruiting industry. I've been doing that for 13 years. I was with Olston for 6 years. They got bought by Adecco. I was then with Spherion for 10 years. They got bought by Randstad. I had nothing to do with either of those. It was just a timing thing. But I'm thrilled to have this group because I know all three of you. Lisa and I worked at Spherion many years ago. Teresa and I have known from each other for many years. In fact, we were introduced by John Walters from Essential Staff Care, which is one of the podcast sponsors. And then Ron, I haven't known for as long. We actually met in person, about 2 months ago. We spoke at a conference together. But I've been singing Ron's praises for 3 years now, ever since Demographic Drought came out. It's part of my discussion, and I always steer people towards it. I say that I should get commission for referring them, but then Ron said, "Well, we don't actually make anything from Demographic Drought. It's free to download."
Commission is you're actually getting your commission.
I am getting my percentage of the commission. So yeah. So anyways, I'm excited to have all of you on here, and I'm excited about our conversation. We want to just kind of keep this lively and informative, and I guess we'll start off just with let's talk about the 800-pound gorilla in the room. Are we in a recession? Are we going in a recession? Are we in a downturn? I work with staffing and recruiting firms all day long, and that's the question I get all the time. And I have some thoughts on that, but I'll let you guys talk first. So anybody who'd like to kind of jump in and see give us your perspective, that'd be great.
Let me first off, I just want to kick off with something here, and that is, historically speaking, when we talk about a recession, what's a recession? And people talk about, well, there's consecutive quarters of negative GDP, but really a key element that, if you look at the definition, is as accompanied by a spike in unemployment. And, if you look back to last year, we actually had 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP, but at the time, really, there wasn't anybody really talking about recessions. We were talking about technically speaking or not. And here we are now, and we're sitting here, months and months into rate increases by the Fed, and we worked our way up off of a almost all-time historical low of 3.4% unemployment to 3.6% unemployment, which is, historically speaking, kind of absurdly low. And I think that this is where you kind of get into this issue of why this is all becoming very, very difficult to analyze, and why a lot of economists are getting it wrong. And that is, you're basically looking back at historical actions. When the Fed raises interest rates, they cause things to happen, and that usually slows the economy down. But we've never had a labor shortage during a run-up. So a recession takes care of overheating. The economy cools off because it was overheating. And so in this case, we were trying to overheat because we had put a lot of money into the economy. People were trying to buy goods, but there wasn't anybody to make the goods. We ballooned up to 12 million job openings, but we never really filled them. In fact, we're still around, 11 million, 10 million job openings, which is still, historically speaking, an absurdly high number. So I think what's happening is a lot of traditional economists are looking back on history, trying to say, well, this is what's going to happen, but this isn't history anymore. We're defining a new history right now. So I would just say that as a general view of what's happening right now, but I'll leave it to the others to kind of comment about. It's also kind of what you feel and what we're kind of seeing in the industry, which I know some people are out there going, hey, it feels like we're in a recession. And we'll talk about that more as this goes on.
Yeah.
So I would say what it was interesting is I've been talking to friends, let's say a year and a half ago, and they go, what do you think? Because always before I'd be like, hey, the industry I'm in, you guys, I can tell you 6 months before it's going to happen. Because particularly in the commercial staffing part of the industry, you almost always see it, and we were not seeing it. I mean, pay rates were strong, bill rates were strong, demand was strong. But I would say about August last year, with many of the companies I'm working with, people started saying, hey, are you hearing anybody else talk about job orders declining a little bit? Hey, are you hearing direct hire slow down? Hey, are you hearing? And so slowly over like August to October, I think everybody that I spoke to was beginning to feel something that felt like a beginning of something. It feels like, to me, it may not be a full-on what I would call a recession, because the ones I have worked through over my career of 40 years, pretty steep cliff. You just fall off of it. And this seems like more of a downturn, at least at this point, that it is feeling like it's not going to have the same dramatic impact. Because of what you said, Ron, the demand is still so high just for talent in general. And those are many things around the demographics that I'm sure you'll speak more to as we go through this. But I do think that there is a bit of a slowdown. I'm actually even hearing over the last few weeks, a few people like being a little more optimistic. So we'll see where that goes. But I would say definitely we're beginning to see a little bit of a downturn. I think we're going to have, a couple quarters that aren't going to feel great. But I will say almost everyone I'm talking to is beginning to believe that by year end, we'll start seeing maybe some growth again in some of those sectors. And I know some sectors have held up better. Professional services had and others. But anyway, that's what I'm kind of seeing as a broad base of. I think it's often interesting in staffing as you go to the events and you go to the places and everybody kind of tells one piece of the story, but I'm kind of now back behind the curtains with a lot of people. I know the full truth. So it's a little bit different, it's not like, hey, I'm positioning this because a competitor may hear it. So that's at least what I'm hearing and what I would say I believe is happening.
Yeah.
And Lisa, I would say the same thing. I've heard people call this a white collar recession, right? Because of all the layoffs that have been going on with, Amazon and Facebook, et cetera. But yeah, I think the government definition versus what we're feeling is kind of where we are, right? And you touched on that. What is the formal definition of recession? And I'm like you, I feel that there is some slowing, but we are a government contractor. So there is a lot of business out there for government contractors. And I just reviewed our pipeline yesterday. So in that respect, that is not slowing. But the talent shortage is going to be the problem. So
right.
No problem.
Well, and maybe in some respects, the talent shortage is also helping us go into that recession too. Yes. Is it fair to say? So yeah, this group has been through recessions. You would know it was a recession, or usually it takes you a little time to know, but then you really know, especially in our industry. And I think when you think about it, the Great Recession happened 14 years ago, and we've had this period of growth ever since. You've got two generations in the workforce that for the most part didn't experience a bit of a slowdown. And so I think that may be some of what we're seeing. I also think that it's one of those things where over the past year, what I've seen is that the phone was ringing by non-traditional staffing and recruiting prospects. The people who in the past had always been able to fill their jobs on their own were calling into staffing companies going, we need help with servers and with, all these different kind of non-traditional positions. And been doing it for 28 years. When did the phone ring before? The last couple of years. It just didn't ring. Well, now the phone has stopped ringing a little bit. I also think we're seeing, and Ron, you can probably speak to this, it seems like wage inflation has slowed. It was insane at the beginning of last year for about 6 months, and depends on the market, but I think that has changed a lot as well.
Yeah, when you look at that, for sure, I feel that sometimes data lags in picking up things that we're kind of already feeling. Mm-hmm. And I think right now you're not really seeing, actually still kind of get these increases in, average hourly earnings and such. But I mean, the vibe on the street and what I get from talking to companies is they kind of drew a line in the sand towards the end of last year, like enough, like I can't go any higher. And I think what a lot of people realized was it wasn't giving them anything. People were increasing pay rates, and for what? To watch somebody come in the door and walk out again in a month. Right. It wasn't causing retention. It wasn't getting you a better quality workforce. It was just wage inflation. And I think after a while, employers adapt, and adapting could mean several things. It could mean turning down certain business going forward, or not accepting, if you're a construction company, not accepting additional contracts. It could mean keeping a part of your restaurant shuttered because you're just going to go with a smaller wait staff. And that's a way that you can kind of deal with ballooning labor costs, is by just keeping your demand side more in check. And I really feel that we saw businesses making that adjustment towards the end of last year. You see it right now in manufacturing companies that are kind of flexing their production without flexing their workforce. They don't really need to lay off because they were kind of abusing people last year. And now they're able to kind of distribute this and produce things on a more predictable pattern coming in. So I think all of those things are in play.
Yeah.
I definitely am seeing with the companies I'm working with that wage inflation is not happening real time. It's slowed down. And I think we're getting close to that. We're going to wrap year over year. If you look at the staffing industry in general, much of the growth last year has been around wage increase and bill rate increase, not unit increase. Total different scenario. And, if you really look at unit increase, and that's what so many people are now measuring themselves against, year over year and that kind of thing versus just that, I think we're about to wrap that one number that will be wage and bill rate. And now it's going to have to come through some kind of unit increase, hours increase to really see growth in the industry. Yeah. And I think that's actually great for us as consumers and the overall economy. This whole, the only way we're going to get inflation down is once that's wrapped, right? Once you're year over year on wage inflation, you can now start seeing something that's going to make people feel like, okay, we're now not seeing that huge increase, but companies can't necessarily operate on less profit, right? So once they've got to capture all of that. So hopefully we're close on that. And that's good for us both, just immediately here in our US economy. But ultimately, if we can't get that under control, it makes us less competitive globally. I think that's the other thing people have to keep in mind is for us to be competitive and not start offshoring. A lot of things have come onshore. Now they're, we keep this up and it's going to start going offshore other places. So there's all those things to consider around the business, but I do think that we're getting closer on, at least on the wage side, from what I'm seeing in almost every sector.
Well, I think it's a great point because we saw obviously healthcare had the biggest, the COVID rates and all that, and that's come back down, and so that artificially increased some areas. And then there's other areas, you got like industrial where seasonal. We've seen seasonal differentials bigger than ever before, and so that come back down a little bit. So I do think we'll start looking at apples to apples a little more. The one thing that we've seen is that there has not only been not necessarily as much growth on client size, but also length of assignment. Length of assignment keeps shrinking, and we've seen many of our clients where length of assignment is half of what it was before, and there just hasn't been enough focus on that length of assignment. But it's, it doesn't matter if you bring them in at whatever rate they're at if they don't last very long. And so it's that's one of the areas that we're really focused on is if we don't have enough people, and we're going to talk about that more later, but if we don't have enough people, and we all agree we don't, then we got to keep them as long as we can. They become more and more valuable.
And Tom, I wanted to just add, it's really impacted my organization from my staff or recruiters, because you had these big companies like Amazon saying, hey, I'm going to hire your recruiters. I'm going to pay them 6 figures. And then the recruiters is gone. And now they've been laid off.
Right.
Now that's adjusting itself. But I also know that in the government sector, we do a lot of cleared recruiting, that those wages are still going to be high because you need people who have those high level clearances.
Yep.
There's still going to be the challenge of, oh my gosh, I've got a cleared person. I've got 3 or 4 companies that want to hire that cleared person. And then to go back to what you talked about the length of assignment, the phone is ringing because people need people. They can't do it on their own, but they want them full time. Yeah. So the assignment length is shrinking in that respect.
Yeah, great. I want to pause just for a second and tell everybody who's listening that we want this to be interactive. So if you have any questions you want to ask, put it in the Q&A part, and I'll pay attention to the questions. And as we get them, we'll ask everybody. And if you have a question that you want to ask a specific panelist, please put their name in there as well. So, there's already one. Geez, that was quick, Janet. To clarify by length of assignment, do you mean temp work or tenure, or are clients contracting for shorter assignments? Good question. What I'm referring to is temporary contract length of assignment. How many hours? We also take a look at gross profit dollars per hour and take a look at what's the average gross profit. And that's really helpful too, as the cost of recruiting continues to increase. And I don't know what everybody else is seeing on this panel, but we're running those kind of numbers of what cost per new start is for my clients, and it's usually in the range of $250 to $400, just pure costs, like directly associated. I don't know if you guys have ever done anything like that, have any kind of different numbers or same numbers, but if you're doing that, and let's say you're doing lower level positions where you're making $4 or $5 an hour, you got 70, 80 hours before you even break even, right? So I don't know. Have you guys looked at anything like cost per new start or anything like that?
Yes, definitely. Have looked at it from, cost of, acquisition for kind of what the top of the funnel, each phase of the funnel, and then a start. Yeah. And try to better understand that in terms of, how much what's a start per Indeed, what's a start to referral, what's a start through, all the different mechanisms. I think it's, I think companies in general have gotten much more sophisticated about that generally the last decade of trying to measure that and understand that. So
yes, and I agree with Lisa. We're also smarter in the respect that the return on investment for all of our applications and tools, right? And if there's something that's not getting us the return that we need, then we eliminate it or try something different. So we've gotten much better at that as well.
Yeah, there's a interesting study that came out just a few months ago that looked at different recruiting sources, and one of the things they found was that their clients, it was done by this, I'm blanking on the name of the company right now, but it was they manage their client spend and do data on different recruiting sources, and they were showing that in this particular data, job postings from 2020 to 2021 had gone up 49%, yet applications had gone down 30-some percent. And so it's obviously the ROI is changing so fast on that we really have to know what we're doing if we're going to even, accept certain types of jobs.
Right. And we do that monthly on all of our tools, our recruiting tools and applications. We run an ROI on that.
Wow. Yeah, that's great. Another question here. Does it truly matter if we are in a recession? Good question. If client companies believe we're in a recession, that becomes the reality, whether the Fed says we're in a recession or we meet the definition of a recession. If we behave as if we're in a recession, do we not cause it to occur? Boy, we actually talked right before this.
I do want to address this because I saw that question come in. There's no time in any history that consumer sentiment causes a recession. That's something that does come up a lot is, well, if everybody pulls back, then you get a recession. No, what you get is a temporary slowdown as people kind of reassess the market. And then once people start to realize, you can say, well, I think I'm going to cut back. But if your orders keep coming in and you start fulfilling your orders, then the numbers are going to keep running. And then as people are trying to fill their orders and they're giving you more orders because you're an input good to their product, then you have to do things. So I want to make sure that I clarify something because I did this on LinkedIn about a week or two ago. We still have a tremendous housing shortage. We still, historically speaking, have some of the lowest active listings of homes in this country for sale ever. Like, it's incredible to see how few homes are for sale. And that's why home prices are still about 30% overinflated. We have, historically speaking, the lowest number of automobiles for sale that we've ever seen. We have the lowest auto inventories that we've ever seen. So there's a lot of money. So if you think about it like this, we have a 3.6% unemployment rate. What does that mean? That means that pretty much everybody who wants a job has a job, and they've just come through a pretty significant year of wage inflation, even though regular inflation ate into that. But people have jobs. When you have a job, you spend money. If you know anything about Americans, we don't save. So we're spending money. So when we look at consumer spending, it's incredibly healthy. In fact, if we look at even the most recent quarter, yes, it eased off of goods, which is why staffing companies are feeling it, because staffing serves that good side: warehousing, manufacturing, logistics, distribution. Staffing does a really poor job on the services side: restaurants, hotels. That's where the money's flowing right now. And we actually look at those numbers. They did pretty well. And consumers have a lot of money now. We're not seeing, I mean, you get a couple high profile layoffs, but don't misunderstand those high profile layoffs. IT unemployment is still extraordinarily low. A lot of those layoffs were H-1B, so they're not even going to show up in our numbers. If we look at our unemployment, the amount of unemployment claims, 1.684 million. That, historically speaking, is the same level that we had back in 1972, despite the fact that our population has grown dramatically. So, a lot of people with jobs spending money keeps an economy going, not how you feel about it, but how you do it. And then companies will react to what consumers do. So that's why, it's really hard. I'm not in the recession camp. I'm not calling for one. just because I think the fundamentals of what it's going to take to get us there, it's going to have to be catastrophic. And a lot of people go, oh, you mean like Silicon Valley Bank, going under? I'm like, no, like literally a completely catastrophic event in the economy. So I think if we just keep rolling along, people keep spending money, you can kind of manage your way through this. I will say this, because this is the most important part, and I've been saying this since the middle of last year. Had we actually hired the people to fill those 12 million job openings, yes, you would have seen 7-10 million layoffs, but we didn't. So you can't lay off what you didn't hire. And that's the thing I always want to make sure we drive home is the economy was trying to overheat, but it just couldn't do it in the way that it wanted to. So it's kind of keeping us from having a recession to take care of what could have happened, because it just didn't happen.
Yeah.
I'd say one of the points on the question on does it matter if we're in a recession or not? It probably doesn't in a way. I mean, we're dealing with whatever we're dealing with. But I would say if you think your buyer is in a recession mindset, you can probably take action to help overcome that to some extent. And, it's kind of funny to me because we're going to talk, if we get time, about, what do we see in the future? And there's many, many things that have changed in the industry, but some of the basics of the business, I've laughed because it's the same as it was 40 years ago when I started. But like, to me right now, what people can do is we all know our buyers go and they look at line items and they see contract labor. Get that $3 million out of here. That's the first thing the CFO is going to talk about and that kind of thing, because they're not understanding the difference of the cost structure or what's really productivity out of that. And so how can we help, to go to our client and kind of use that old paper tool I had back in, the 80s, where you build up what your bill rate looks like versus their total cost of employee, and help them understand that that's not necessarily where they're going to save any money. And, maybe having flexibility in their workforce is more important than the other, than having the full-time employee. So I think there's things that we can do because we know people are going to behave like we're in one, or a certain group of our buyers are going to. So how do we overcome that in our conversations with them, our education with them, that might make their buying patterns change? Because I've seen many companies change their strategy when we've helped them understand those dynamics. So yeah.
You're right, because we have that cost comparison sheet that we've used for many, many years. And just showing that to the customer, and say, take a look at this and compared to your internal full-time, that is not necessarily the best decision to make, is to let that person go. Yeah.
Well, and this is a great opportunity for us to be more consultative to our clients, because as our clients are starting to get anxious, they're going to be looking for answers. And so we can be that answer for them, and we should be proactively reaching out to them and talking about, this is what the situation is. This is what we're seeing. The majority of people that are listening and watching this are in the staffing industry, and they have better exposure to the market than their clients do. They see a broader swath of what's going on, so they can go back to them and say, let me tell you what we're seeing in the market, and let me tell you how you can adjust to this. The other thing I would say is that the question about, does it truly matter? I think it's a good question, because recessions to me are very individualized. You could have your neighbor on the left that's laid off, and you could have the neighbor on the right that just got promoted in the same exact economy. It happens all the time. You can have one of your branches that's doing great and another one that's really struggling. And I think we're seeing that a lot. And the one other thing that I would say too is that, so much of this is self-fulfilling. So Ron, you were talking about that consumer sentiment can't drive this, but at a individual level, at an individual company level, it certainly can influence them. And
slows you down is what you do. Because what we're seeing right now, if you look at it, even though it's on the overall JOLTS report, you're just not seeing it as much as we kind of see it in our Lightcast data. Is I think right now we're in a process of people laying off job openings. So they're not laying off people, they're laying off job openings. And the reason you're doing that is you're like, look, ramping up when the wave's coming in seems like a pretty bad idea. So until you're sure what that wave's going to feel like, you probably want to hold your ground. And I think what's happening right now is there's a bit of that. Now, if you're in the warehouse space, what's happening to you is something I was calling for by mid-year last year, and that is when logistics chains started to get unplugged, and products actually started to move, we knew that the logistics channel was grossly overbloated. I mean, we look at the historical growth pattern of the warehousing and transportation industry, it had taken a very unnatural turn, and it needs to get back to its growth line. And I think it's doing that right now. So your orders are slowing down because there was bloat that needs to be corrected. This is actually going to come, if we, I don't know if we're going to, we have another question I think we were going to talk about, but it comes to another point, and that is, it's real easy when the fountain's running full open to stick your cup under one faucet and just drink and be like, this is great. Realize, and you didn't even look at any of the other ones. Maybe they weren't coming out as fast as that, but you didn't even try. And so you're so overexposed to a sector that when it slows down, it's going to hurt. So the secret of that is diversifying into different sectors that are a little bit more immune. I just wrote an article for Forbes on that. If you go to my LinkedIn, it has the link for it. But I just talk about that. I get it. Everybody wants the easy money, but when the easy money stops, you're in a lot of pain. And that's usually because, like I said, you got a little too focused.
Yeah.
So Ron, I'm glad you brought that up because I'm not in the construction staffing business. But if I were in construction staffing, what an opportunity we have right now, right? Because there are so many high school students, even students who may not necessarily want to finish a college degree, where they could go into a trades. I mean, we've taught our kids that you need a college education to be a professional, but how excited do you get when that HVAC person shows up in 100-degree temperature to fix your AC, right? and we devalue that on the when they're younger, but we value it now. I just heard a data point this morning that there's 500,000 construction jobs out there. Boy, if I were in the construction staffing business, I've got a whole plan in my head of what I would be doing. What an opportunity for us to make placements in that area. But I'm not in construction staffing.
You don't want to diversify in that area?
Thank you for plugging my last article. So the last article I wrote was called "Who's Going to Do the Work?" It's about skilled trades. If you haven't read it, I go right for that point of you've got to pay attention. There's a lot of skilled trades jobs that are now overtaking college jobs. And we've been beating that college drum so much that I think we're starting to lose sight of the fact of there's critical jobs that are going to keep this country running that are not college. And I think anything parents can do, guidance counselors can do to stop saying beating the same message into everybody's kid that you're going to have to do this. You can do it eventually. I mean, my dad got a college degree in his 40s. Like, there's other jobs out there and they make really good money. And I think we need to do a better job of presenting this opportunities.
Apprenticeships, training. I mean, I would be going to my clients, my construction clients, say, listen, I can get you some high school kids. Let's get them under a apprenticeship. I mean, my dad was a plumber. My daughter wants to be a plumber. Be a plumber. I mean, you know, we need them. America is built on what we build, right? So anyway.
Absolutely. I want to answer another question here. How can we help each other in this group to survive this unexpected market change situation? I work for IT and healthcare pharma staffing company from New Jersey office. We are struggling for reliable companies who could help us grow. Anybody have thoughts on that question? Sounds like they're struggling a little bit. They've had a bit of a downturn.
Maybe find some partners. That's one of the things we've done. You know, we talk about, you know, there's only so many pieces of a pie that's out there. So let's share it. So maybe find a partner who has another opportunity in a different wheelhouse than you do and partner together and chase that. We're doing it. We've got some, we have a mentor protege program we've developed. So we've got some veteran-owned businesses that we're working for, so we can go after veteran-owned opportunities that we can't because we're not veteran-owned. So I think really look at your partnership and maybe either be a protege or be a mentor.
Yeah, I think it's a great point that, you know, now is a great time to belong to organizations, to belong to your local staffing association, to belong to the national ones, because now's the time to have that network internally where you've got somebody you're talking to that you develop a relationship with, and they go, I don't do what you do, but I get people who ask me all the time. I would love to have a referral partner for that. I think it's a great point. Other thoughts on kind of this? I'm kind of reading into this that it's an unexpected market change of, we used to have a bunch of orders, now we're struggling for orders, we are hearing some of that.
Well, I think that, you know, I think about over the years, like the amount of time, you know, spent on including me, fighting against MSPs and VMS and, all of this, and I'm going to get not as good of orders, and I'm not going to get as good a bill rates, I'm going to get as good margin. And that's true in many situations, but it also isn't true in every situation. And in fact, in companies I've worked for and led, when we really went down and we analyzed that wasn't true. We actually were getting better bill rates through a VMS than we were through some of our direct clients. And so I would say, it's kind of just another theme on what Teresa's saying, like, go find partners and different people you could work with that might have access to orders. Because if you think about this right now, people are, if they're beginning to get less orders, they're not going to buy outside the system. They're going to buy through the system, and they're going to buy through procurement. And if anyone's going to be laying down orders right now, you cannot buy anything outside of procurement. It's going to be anybody that's struggling right now financially of our buyers. So I would say explore that, and yes, there's good and bad about all those, however you get those orders. But if that is one of the things, like I said, I was one of them that fought it for a long time. And I think you may try to find the right partner that works for you and meets what your financial goals are.
And, Ron made a statement about diversifying, right? But you can also diversify your orders. So everybody wants that client who's going to give you 50 job orders. Well, that's not necessarily how it works. It's very hard to come by. But if you've got 50 clients with one order, and then another order, and then another order, that's the way to do it.
Right.
So my father-in-law has this saying that, and he says it all the time. I'm like, oh, I already said that. It's a tree with many roots survives the drought.
Correct.
Right. So
yeah, I've seen people in my last company who hit a contest, literally selling to every mom and pop shop in town, and everybody knew this person, and they were phenomenal at the relationships. And I think, sometimes you have a sweetheart deal in your market where you have one or two clients and they're sending you a ton of business, and that feels really good. And you can ride that, train for quite a while, but sometimes those companies go bankrupt, or sometimes anything else. And I think it's that, you can't ever stop working. And I think when things are right now, we're in a pause, and in a lot of industries, we're in a pause. And I think right now everybody's looking for that. Hey, help me find business. I'm panicking, everything. What's interesting to me is last year, talking to multiple of our clients saying, look, I have more orders than I've ever had before, but I can't fill any of them. And now we're to a point where how fast it turned, where people were like, oh, wow. Now I'm not, I'm just not getting the order flow that I was getting. Well, you kind of sometimes have to slow down with that. You can't expect the same throughput. You may have to make some pauses internally. What I caution people is just be careful, because let's say confidence starts to return. Let's say after a while, people start to realize, hey, all of these rate increases really aren't changing anything. And yeah, I do notice that my warehouse is starting to get empty now. I'm going to have to replenish those goods. You want to be there. You want to be ready. So what happens sometimes is during downturns, people get sloppy and they just start, cutting everything. And now you're not ready to grow when it grows. So, always take advantage of your down times to be ready to be big again.
And Ron, I think another thing with that is your MPCs, your most placeable candidates.
Mm-hmm.
And as an industry, I have seen that we're very poor at this. We get a really good candidate, but we don't have a current job, right? So if you've got those, whoever asked the question, if you've got those candidates that you've already vetted, you've already screened, they're great, go out and reverse market those candidates, clients that you're currently working with. And you may find a job that you didn't know was out there.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think the MPCs, skill marketing, whatever, there's 18 different things that people call it, but it's where you have that marketable in-demand candidate. Mm-hmm. Not the purple squirrel that nobody needs, but and not the person that is applying to absolutely everything on the job boards, but that one that usually is more of a passive candidate, but they're starting to kind of test the waters. We call them semi-active candidates. They're the window shoppers. Those are the ones that you want to be able to go out and market, and that's the lowest hanging fruit. Yeah, the other piece is to go back to all your clients and get them out to lunch, get them out to breakfast. As I talk to my clients and as I go and speak and train across the country, people have stopped interacting in person. They got out of the habit during COVID. Yeah. It hasn't come back yet. And I talk to people all the time and go, what's the last time you took one of your clients out to lunch? And they go, you know what? We used to do that all the time. I go, okay, well, let's start doing it again. And if you're not doing it, somebody else might be. But if they're not doing it, then you have an opportunity. And, we all know, being on this call, just having breakfast or lunch with somebody, just having a meeting with it, good things happen. You start to have conversations that you don't have if you're just exchanging texts or emails or even on the phone. Do it in person. I tell people all the time, in the 28 years I've been doing this, there was never one day where we had exactly as many candidates as we did jobs.
Right.
It was never like a perfect day, right? There's always too much of one, not enough of the other. And we're starting to see it shift a little bit, but some of it is also, well, I'm used to having 500 open jobs. Now I only have 200 open, and I'm starting to get a little antsy. But I think that over the last 13, 14 years, where we've been going towards this talent shortage and where we've had lots of jobs and we've had more opportunities, a lot of the industry's gotten complacent about the sales side. And Ron mentioned it earlier, where we hear it all the time. Why would I go out and sell? I got too many jobs to fill as it is. Well, this is why, because it can turn on you very quick. And the other thing is too, you've got a bunch of jobs, but are they any good? Are you compromising on those jobs? If there are a bunch of jobs you can't fill, a bunch of clients that aren't very attractive, that don't do a good job of communicating with you, that their pay rates aren't good. Well, yeah, you got a bunch of jobs, but it's stuff you can't fill. So, best time to plant a tree was 10 years ago. Next best time to plant a tree is today. Get out and sell. And that's my biggest piece of advice to everybody, particularly the person who asked the question, is got to sell. Get out and sell. Bring in new clients. Let's see here. According to the panel, what do they think will be the primary bottleneck when it comes to the problem, the inflated pay rates sorting itself out? I'm not sure exactly. Anybody want to take a stab at that? Not sure exactly.
I have to talk about it all the time, so I'll take a stab at it.
Okay, good. All right, good.
So I don't think we're in a situation where, at least through 2038, you're ever going to see a labor surplus again. So I don't think we're in a situation where you could see pay necessarily. It's not going to go back to where it was, and it really probably was a little low. I think in some sense, one of the things I keep talking about is people have to understand that a lot of the pressure that was occurring, that continues to occur in our economy, is that we are really good at creating kind of sub $20 an hour jobs, but we really don't have a lot of people to fill those jobs. And so what's happening is you're starting to get this ballooning effect in the middle. So people who kind of, I'd say staff accountant level people, I'll use that as a token profession, but there kind of is a balloon there. We're hearing companies saying that they open a job and they're getting, 50 applicants in a day for something. And then you have somebody who opens a job for a maintenance mechanic and they get one applicant over 3 weeks. And I think that this still continues to be a problem where if you start to get wage softening, be aware that is usually occurring because there's a plentiful amount of people, not because somebody offered a lower wage. Because just because you offer a lower wage doesn't mean anybody good is going to take that wage. Keyword there being good. We're starting to get people re-entering the labor force. We are starting to get some labor force participation increases. It's small. Now, the concern here is some of these people have been out of the labor force for 2 years, and a lot of your clients aren't going to want to talk to them.
Great.
So they're going to want to talk to that person who actually stayed in the labor force, has been working hard this whole time. And those people, their wages now been bid up. They're now $20 an hour when they were 14. The people coming in, they'll take the 14 to 16, but the client's not going to be happy. So you got to understand, like, wage pressure is kind of this huge holistic term for, well, what do you want? Do you want a really good worker for a cheap wage? No. But if you want a worker, yeah, you might be able to do something on the cheap, but don't, can't come crying about quality aspects with that.
Yep.
Do you think, it just adding to that, do you think at some point, or maybe you already are seeing it, that wage inflation would get to a point that it would pull some of the early retirees back in?
Didn't happen last year. So we look at the labor force participation rate for people above the age of 55. It's stuck. It never moved. So it came up flat line, came up flat line, and now we're sitting here 2.5 years out, and it's just not recovering. I cover all of this when I speak, and that the big part is the wealth accumulated in that population was pretty strong. And even if they come back in, they're not going to engage in the way that you would want them to. And it's funny because some of the initial articles about people re-engaging were people who were becoming, I remember one guy opened a Taekwondo studio. Another one's like, I had to go back to doing consulting. And I'm like, look, that's not fair. Like what people are saying is, are you going to come back and take my call center job? It's like,
right.
No, they're not going to do that. And that's just when we talk about re-attracting that retired population, they're going to do things like my dad did, like work at the golf course as a ranger. It's better to be yelled at by a golfer driving around a cart all day than, answering the phone, being yelled at by strangers. So I think this is what we always have to understand is what would it mean to bring them back? And then secondarily to that is not a solution. Okay. I'm going to really pay up and maybe I can get people to unretire. And how does that solve our problem? Right. I would much rather you look at your labor strategy, pay reasonably, provide a great job for people, automate what you can, combine jobs, rotate jobs, work on things that are going to make the experience better so you can actually fill the jobs in the long run versus Band-Aid fixes like, well, I'm going to balloon the pay up for a little bit, but it's still the same cruddy job.
Yeah, Ron, I'm one of those people that you were talking about. A retained search person that I love called me probably a year ago and said, there's this job open that you and like 5 other people in the country could fill. Any chance you would let me put your name in? And I'm like, there is not a package you put together that would interest me to, because it's interesting. I never even thought this, but when you get to a certain stage in life, you're like, no, I don't want that full-time responsibility of it.
That's right.
I still hope I'm making meaningful impact, but it's just different. And so I think you're right. I mean, that's probably not where we should be spending our time because it isn't going to solve the problem long-term anyway, and
they're just going to retire again in another year or two. So
right.
What did you do with that?
That's right.
But there is an opportunity there, right? I mean, there is an opportunity, especially you mentioned call center, where you may have a call center where you have retirees who want to just work 4 hours a day because they want to keep their brain fresh and they want to, talk with people because, we've read everything that says if you sit on your sofa, it's like smoking a pack of cigarettes a day. So if we can get call center jobs shared with retirees, and I do know people who are doing that. I mean, that is a really good opportunity. So I always try to look at the opportunity side, and it might not solve our problem, but at least in the short term, it would make that person happy, the client happy, and we have a billable person in that seat. So
I love that concept of what you did right there. Like that's reinventing the job. And that's what I want people to see. But because when I hear, I'm just going to increase pay until somebody's willing to come back in, I'm like, that's not the answer. But if you're like, hey, I'm willing to, locate this closer to retirement community, but I still want to talk to these people first. Like, hey, we put up a sign-up sheet every day and somebody could say, I'm going to sign up for those 3 hours because I have nothing else to do that. Great idea. Very cool. Very flexible. Such a creative plan. But I think a lot of people are like, no, that's going to take me too long. I need this job filled right now. So I'm just going to try another $1. And then another $1, and at that point, we end up in this kind of same situation.
I agree.
Well, and I was speaking at a conference this morning about just the future of talent acquisition, and it was here in Columbus, Ohio, and I asked the question about part-time work. I said, how many people have changed and offer part-time or flexible options? And there were probably 75 people in the room, and 4 raised their hand.
Right.
4. And I go, you've got to realize that you've got all of these different demographics now that are wanting part-time work for all these different reasons. You've got your retirees, semi-retirees. You got the Gen Xers that are starting to retire, early but still want to do things. You've got other generations that are wanting 2 or 3 part-time jobs, right? I mean, Ron, I think you talked about it in your demographic drought about that they want multiple part-time jobs. Well, they still need to get benefits somewhere. So can you offer part-time people benefits? Can you give them flexibility? There's Lisa, you know this well, coming from healthcare. Healthcare's been doing part-time flexible work for decades, but other professions and other industries aren't doing that. So
I think there's a misperception that if I have 2 part-time people doing one job, it's going to take more of my time. When in reality, it doesn't. And you do have that flex work schedule. And I think we need to change that perception.
Yeah. I mean, does it take more time to manage 2 people or to have that position empty?
It comes down to who did you hire. If you hire 2 good people, then it may be less work. But if you hire one bad person, that's going to take you more
Right.
work. It's always going to be the funnel at the beginning. And, staffing companies have an onus in that as well. Do your job up front, screen a candidate really well. That client, everybody's going to tell you. I get solicitations every day from staffing companies. Oh, so you have openings. I don't personally, but our company's had some things, and I'm like, I'm not hiring, but what's different? Where's that testimonial of, man, everybody we place, our clients just rave about it. And once again, this is the time. If you're in a lull right now, make sure you really lock down, your screening things. Make sure every person you provide is just phenomenal and they're finishing their assignment successfully. And, I think there's just so many things you can do around that.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting because I can now kind of be that Monday morning quarterback because I'm not running the companies anymore. But one of the things that I look at as an industry, and including me again, I'm guilty of all these things I now can see, is that we spend so much time and energy. Like Tom asked that question, do you know what it costs you for every start? Do you know what it costs you for every piece of the funnel? Many companies have gotten excellent at that. They can measure that. They know the cost of each one of them. They know when they're off of that. But I think where we generally as an industry really fall short, and I still think we're falling short from the companies I'm working with and that kind of thing, is we don't really measure to the same degree and have the same focus and have the same conversations, as many hours of conversation around, do we have the job, Susie's job ends 2 weeks from now. Do we already have Susie pre-placed? And, my teams, we used to talk about it. I'm like, how many of you guys would be not looking for another job if you didn't know where your paycheck was coming in 2 weeks from now? You would be looking, and we don't spend near the amount of time on that. And if there was a way we could shift our time and energy to that, is many people leave working for staffing firms, not because they don't love the flexibility, the pay's fair, there's all those things, but it is unnerving. It's unnerving to know where you're going to go next. And so how do we as an industry think about spending more time about that, giving people reassurance on how we're going to make them? And I know we've all tried to build benches where we pay people full time, and that's all hard. But is there a way that we can put in processes that give people confidence, because they are just like we are? Next, you want to know where your paycheck's going to come from, and we don't spend enough time on that. It's like, great, we placed them. Now who's our new candidate? Where's our candidate? Where's our candidate? Instead of, how do we really make these people feel like I am going to take care of them, and that they do not need to leave my company, my staffing firm, to go somewhere else? I think lots of time we could spend on that.
I think it's, I think one of the issues is that I take issue with the title of recruiter, because in direct hire, yes, you are recruiting, and then you're moving on to the next one. In contract staffing, the work has just begun, and that somebody needs to own that relationship, whether it is that quote recruiter or whatever we want to call them, whether they continue to have that relationship or it gets handed off to a group that really focuses on retention. But absolutely, you're right. It's amazing. I've worked with companies that have 5% redeployment rates, like IT companies, and Tracy could probably speak to this, but 5% redeployment. I know I'm going to have this person for 6 months on there, and I don't talk to them to see if I can place them again. It's crazy. Tracy, you were going to say something.
That goes back to the old sales style of selling too, right? If you've got somebody that's going to end in 6 months, what did we used to do? We would call 5 months in. You still need this person, because guess what? I am going to start marketing them for another opportunity. And how many times did the client say, no, we need them. We need to keep for another 3 or 4 months. So that's that part. And then those individuals are your NPCs, right?
That's right.
So you ask the question, look at the people you have on contract. Lisa brings up an excellent point. See where their end dates are, and then start selling those candidates to new clients.
They've already proven themselves. You can go to somebody and say, hey, listen, I got this person coming off of an assignment for 6 months. They're getting great reviews. Would you have any interest in talking to them? Write a first refusal here. You want to look at them? If you don't, no problem. I'll go to the next one. I mean, it's very powerful to go, yeah, there's proof that they already have been able to do this. I'll be happy to talk to them. We've got about 5 minutes, and I do want to kind of wrap up and just talk a little bit about, what do you guys see with the future of staffing? What do you think the next we kind of talked about 6 months and beyond, but further down the road, what do you think what do you think staffing, where are we going with this? Are we all going to just be cloud staffing companies? Are we going to?
No.
No.
Okay.
No.
Yeah, I even look at Chat GPT and people talk about it could do this and it could do that. And I'm like, well, first off, let's establish one clear fact. Technology accompanies a good person. It doesn't typically replace them. In fact, anytime that it has, it's just given us kind of better jobs. But at the end of the day, it is incredible the subtlety of humanity. When you're talking to somebody and you're interviewing them and they're sitting forward and they're looking at you and they're asking questions and you start to forget that they don't even have the experience anymore because you're so blown away by who they are that you can't wait to hire them, and you do hire them and they blow you away. And then the next person comes in, their resume is loaded with everything you've ever wanted, and you're interviewing them like, I wouldn't work with this person if you paid me $1 million to hire him. So I think that's the part that the experience of trust of what does a human bring to the equation. And I think staffing companies need to constantly make sure that it's not about being the fastest to give a candidate. If you gave somebody a really terrible candidate, you just ruined your reputation. It's your ability to stand behind somebody, put your name on them and go, man, I know a good person when I'm seeing them, and this person's it. And I know they don't have everything that you want, but we've already done the research on that. We've placed 5 people like this who also didn't have the same skill set, and they smoked this assignment as well. And I'm willing to stand behind this person with a voucher. Like, that's what we're going to need in the future, because as labor continues to be a constrained resource, I know it's hard to look at this right now in March of 2023 and see this, but it's around us everywhere. It's not going to take much of a flex on that very tight rope to make this really tight again. So be really good at the human aspects of your job.
Ron, you nailed it. You absolutely nailed it. My husband is a software engineer, and we talk about AI all the time. And we also talk about, AI can't pick up the nuances, like, looking at Lisa, shaking her head, she's agreeing to it, and all those things in the interview where you're like, yeah, you see somebody who's concerned or they don't give you the right answer. I mean, you nailed it. Good job.
Yeah, and I look back at it as perspective of 40 years of all the different times that we were like, oh my gosh, they're not going to need us anymore. Think about when the job boards came out. Oh my gosh, they aren't going to need us anymore. They even when VMS, MSP, oh my gosh, they're not going to do that. And now there's the platforms that you don't have the intervention as much with the recruiter and that kind of thing. That takes up a portion of the market, but not the full market, right? And so I think, as Ron says, it always just creates different kinds of jobs. It creates different kinds of opportunity. And so I have kind of found over the 40 years I've been in the business, about 60 to 70% of the business, truthfully, is the same as it was when I started in 1984. And then the rest of it is where it changes, how we deliver it, how we connect with people, how we make things happen. But the human part is still important. And so I think that it will be different. And I think anybody that isn't willing to change, I think those that are willing to change and look at different ways and not be caught up in that will be the winners on this. And I think that's been the case for some time. But I do not think that we're going to see the industry go away. It's continued to boom many years. And I think it will continue to do that as long as the companies are willing to make the changes.
Yeah, I think the miss when people talk about like travel agents, they say, oh, well, we go the way of travel agents, which there still are travel agents out there. I think that's a bad analogy. I think the realtor is a better analogy. Realtors, the realty profession is lagging, has always kind of lagged behind on technology a bit, kind of like our industry has. And yet it still continues to thrive. People get to a certain point and then they go, now I got to bring in somebody to help me finish this. And that's where I think we're going to be, is I think we've got, you don't want to, my advice to people in the industry is you don't want to be known for doing things that can be automated, where AI can do it, things like going out and sourcing just groups of candidates and sending out mass emails and doing, anything that can be automated. That's not what you want to be. You want to have that expertise where it's you're able to identify and match talent together. You're able to pick up on the nuances. If anything, I think all the technology is going to scale the best people and allow the industry to continue to grow.
And empathy, right? Understanding. I mean, we as humans struggle with various things throughout. our life and our career. And we need people who understand that and who's going to listen to that and give us advice and support us. And before we go, I did want to say that this week ASA will be publishing the full year employment revenue data for the industry in 2022. Last year, we employed 14 million American men and women in our industry, 14 million. So huge industry. And we're going to continue to play an important and even greater role in the future as we move forward.
Well, fantastic. Well, thank you all. This has been a great discussion. I knew it would be. So we're going to wrap up. I just had a couple of things. If you missed any of our past episodes or want to revisit them, you can find recordings of our discussions on popular podcast platforms like Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Be sure to sign up for our next live panelcast discussion on Tuesday, May 9th, where we're going to talk about sales and marketing. So that'll be a timely one as well. I'm excited about that. You can sign up for the next Staffing in Sync, as well as access a video library of our past sessions on our website, staffinginsync.com. And I also want to let everybody know, and I want to do a big shout out and a thank you. Staffing in Sync is produced and sponsored by SyncStream Solutions. They are the top provider of the Affordable Care Act compliance for the staffing industry and Essential Staff Care, the largest provider of health insurance and benefits for the staffing industry. So thank you to my panelists. It was awesome, like I knew it would be. Thank you for all those that attended, and have a great rest of the week. We'll see you.
Thank you for the inclusion. Thanks.
Thank you.